US President Donald Trump said he's arranging a meeting between Ukraine's President Zelensky and the Russian President Vladimir Putin, following yesterday's summit with European leaders.
So Keir Starmer, who was there, of course, in Washington too, says he is very pleased with its outcome and the UK would play a part in a security plan that could be enforced if necessary. Well, Treasury Minister Torsten Bell joins us now. Good to speak to you this morning. There are a lot of moments and theatre to give cause for optimism for peace, but are we actually any closer now to understanding what the UK, what all of our commitment to security might mean?
Well, it's lovely to be with you. Thank you for having me. I mean, I think yesterday was significant progress in lots of ways. We saw unity across European allies and with the United States in a way that is very important for strengthening Ukraine's hand. And as you just said, the really important progress yesterday was on the security guarantees. These are issues that the Prime Minister and President Macron have been leading on within Europe, with 30 countries involved in planning with a coalition of the willing to make sure we can provide those guarantees. And the important news yesterday is that the United States will be part of those guarantees. That's absolutely essential because the people of Ukraine can't be expected to rely on the word of President Putin. That's obviously not been worth anything, in fact, worse than anything in terms of the terrible outcomes that they've had to suffer over the course of the last 3 years after his illegal invasion. So those guarantees are really important. You're right to say that there's now lots more work to be done on the nature of those guarantees. That's what is now underway. You've seen that happening immediately. It was already underway, as I say, across 30 countries, and now the United States is going to be involved in that. That is really important, and that's what we need to see. And the reason, remember, we're doing that is one to do exactly what we have been doing by providing arms to Ukraine over the course of the last 3 years, which is to strengthen their hand.
Could we see British troops as part of NATO on the ground going in to guarantee that security?
Well, I think it is premature to be getting into those questions, but what we have been very clear about, and you heard this again from the Prime Minister last night, is that we do need to play our part to provide those guarantees. That is about what happens on the land in Ukraine. It's also about what happens in the air and at sea, to be honest, because we need to make sure that they are strong guarantees, that they involve a wide range of nations, and importantly, that they're backed by the United States. And as I say, that's where we've seen real progress yesterday. That work needs to continue, but directly to your question, could it involve any UK soldiers being in Ukraine? Look, yes, we're not ruling that out, but it's premature to get into the specifics.
And if we do supply soldiers or any kind of military support, surely that is therefore a big financial cost on the country. As somebody involved in the Treasury, what would you like to say to people at home? What should they be prepared for? At the moment, they're feeling the pinch already, and we know that there's welfare reform, the NHS needs money, education needs money, almost every sector in our country needs money at the moment. Is the reality, though, that this war, or this at least security assurance that we'll provide, will take precedent and therefore will be a priority, and we should expect a bit of hardship? It's going to continue because this is the reality of the situation we're in.
No, I mean, look, let's just step back a second. What have we seen? We've seen an illegal invasion of Ukraine, absolutely terrible for the people of Ukraine, and is now, because we're still seeing that violence continuing. We're still seeing drone strikes continuing and harming civilians across the country. But it's also been very bad for people here in the UK, people who have done the right thing, opened their homes to the Ukrainians over the course of the last 3 years, but it's also driven up energy prices. That has contributed to the cost of living crisis that people are suffering with. We are absolutely focused on that. That's what this government is about tackling. That's why we're extending some of our work on energy support. But looking ahead, the cost it takes in terms of supporting Ukraine is being prompted by Putin's illegal invasion. We're not doing it out of choice. We have to have a European continent at peace. That's absolutely in our interest. That's directly in our economic interest for the reasons I've just set out. But much more fundamentally, we need to be a Europe at peace. So we obviously, as a large European country, play our part in that.
Just on that, you refer to it as an illegal invasion, and you're absolutely right, it is an illegal invasion. But suddenly the conversation is getting to this idea of land swaps, that Ukraine may be asked to give up some land to Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, to many people, is one of the worst leaders in modern times, accused of some of the most horrific war crimes for many, many years in a country that's far from democratic. What does that say about us, that we are willing to give land to somebody, like you've just said, illegally invaded a neighbouring country right next to us as part of Europe?
Well, I absolutely agree with your characterisation of President Putin, but we're not in the business of negotiating with him. Our job is to strengthen the hand of Ukraine. Our red line is that decisions about the future of Ukraine are made by Ukraine, and we give them the best chance to make those decisions from a position of strength by supporting them. That's exactly what the Prime Minister is doing. We're supporting them diplomatically. That's what you saw take place yesterday, but we've been supporting them under both political parties in recent years militarily, and that's how we strengthen their hand. That is what we're continuing to do. As I say, what's our red line? It's making sure that any future deal is agreed by Ukraine and by President Zelensky, and that is what you heard consistently from the Prime Minister.
OK. Can we ask you about another conflict? You talk about red lines. Is there a red line in Gaza and Israel? I mean, at the moment we are hearing that Hamas, the reports coming that Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire terms, which will include a partial hostage release. But the narrative still coming out of Israel is that we're expected the military are going to sit and approve, and the cabinet will approve an offensive into Gaza City. Is that a red line for the UK government, that there is even more military action coming from Israel rather than talk of a ceasefire?
Yeah, we've been very clear about that. Israel's well over any acceptable red line. The scenes we're seeing in Gaza are completely unacceptable. Yes, Hamas is a terrible organisation. What happened in October the 7th is completely unacceptable. You know, we've heard warm words from Hamas before about ceasefires, and they've not followed through. We need to see Hamas not only committing to a ceasefire, but disarming and recognising they'll play no future role in the governance of Gaza. But the behaviour of Israel towards the people of Gaza is completely unacceptable and needs to come to a halt immediately.
What is in the UK's power, though? What could the UK do next? If Israel certainly don't listen to Keir Starmer or the UK or anybody in Europe or the West, what could the UK do next?
Well, you're right. We do need to work with a range of allies across Europe, with America, but also across the region itself. That's exactly what we're doing. It's with Jordan that we're involved in the airdrops of aid into Gaza immediately. But we do need to be really clear that it's totally unacceptable to see the kinds of collective punishment that we are seeing of Gazan civilians. We can't have people not only not providing aid in the volumes that is required, but undermining the health system in Gaza in an absolutely terrible way. And we can't see the aggressive settler action that we're seeing in the West Bank. All of these are completely unacceptable kinds of behaviour. The UK is very clear about that, and it needs to be brought to an end.
Lord, back in your backyard of the Treasury, as it were, Lord Kinnock this week called for scrapping of the two-child cap paid for by a wealth tax. You have previously advocated, just to quote you, wealth taxes to raise billions without scaring the horses. Would you like to see the way we tax wealth altered and changed?
Well, look, you judge this government on what it's done. If you look back to the autumn budget last year, we did need to make some difficult decisions on tax to make sure we had sustainable public finances, but also that we could end austerity for public services. Those involved some changes when it comes to the taxation of wealth. You saw that on inheritance tax, you saw that on capital gains, you saw that when it came to the taxation of non-DOMs, you saw it when it came to the VAT on private schools and changes to the tax regime for private jets. And we're not doing those things for fun, we're doing those things because we need to make fair choices to make sure that we can provide the funding that brings down waiting lists in the NHS.
Could a wealth tax be one of those things to look at and choose that you list?
Well, I've just listed what the government's done. Many of those are wealth
in the
taxes.
future,
I'm not
that's what you've already done.
Well, I know, but in the future, you know, as a Treasury Minister, I'm not about to start speculating on individual tax choices. Otherwise, you'll give me a long list of decisions. Those are for the budget and those are for the chancellors, and that's the same boring answer that applies to every tax. But it's important to be clear what we have done, which is some large choices on tax that are fair, that are focused on wealth in many cases, and they're being done for the right reasons, which is to make sure that we can bring an end to austerity for public services.
Torsten Bell, thank you very much indeed. Despite saying it's a boring answer, it was a great pleasure to talk to you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.